Hello YouTube, it's Ryan here with Hobbies Man once again, and today we're going to be doing another light novel review. Today we're going to be looking at Dungeon Busters Volume 2, written by Toma Shinosaki and illustrated by Shen Ringan. And it's published by J Novel Club. Its demographic is adult for sure. It definitely has some fade to black scenes, so it's definitely for adults. The genre here is urban fantasy, game lit, and kind of dungeon core to an extent. It deals with, dungeons appearing in urban settings and then people going into them to spelunk and clear the dungeons. In terms of adaptation, it does not have one. And the premise of this specific volume is that the world is in upheaval, and so politics are shifting immensely. And this story, the author kind of wrote it to deal with the political situations that occur when you have a dungeon outbreak in an urban setting, right? So as well, in the Dungeon Busting Incorporated company are still moving forward. They're recruiting people. They're setting up everything they need to do in order to stop the monster stampede. And along the way, we get to learn more about what they're doing, but we also get to see the politics of the world, like I mentioned earlier. So yeah, the plotline here is pretty good. If the first one was mostly about setting up the company, if it was a company setup type of plot line, this one is more of a, hey, look at all the politics of this world kind of plot line. So we get to see the foreign policy that is being developed around these dungeons. We get to see, US, China, both Korean countries, Japan, and a few others kind of trying to deal with the fact that these outbreaks are happening. And of course, we also get to see them interacting with each other and the way that they kind of work against or for each other. A lot of people say that this light novel comes off as, overtly patriotic towards Japan. And I guess that is true. But I personally don't really find an issue with it, because at the end of the day, this is a fantasy. Even if those are the real world, feelings that the mangaka has, or the light novel author has, in the context of the story, it's fiction. So it doesn't really matter if it's not realistic, because who cares, right? If you can have power fantasy about being a loser and then turning into a super strong warrior, you can have a power fantasy about your country being better than it actually is, right? So I don't really have a problem with its Japanese, patriotic tone, because at the end of the day, most things that we watch here in the US that are made by Americans also have a lot of patriotic kind of militaristic leans towards them, even if we kind of are able to ignore them because we're so used to them, right? So yeah, we get to see the US, China, both Koreas, Japan, and even the Vatican talk about setting up their group of dungeon hunters, right? Or of dungeon busters. And we get to see the continuation of Dungeon Busters Incorporated training the people that are with them, which is, Akira, Matsuo, and Mary. And they also are joined by a few new people that are joining their company in order to get better and become more powerful as people, but also in order to save the world, right? So yeah, and then we get to see the first dungeon cleared, which is actually a big deal within the story, and for good reason, right? So yeah, in terms of characters, we have Ezuo, Akira, Akane, Matsuo, Mary, and Emily, and we get a new character called Liu, who is a kind of older, martial artist kind of character card, the same way that Akane and Emily are character cards. And we get the Dungeon Bureau lady. I can't remember her name off the top of my head. Shihara or something like that. Ishihara, I think. I'm not too sure. We also get to see some people from the Vatican. At the very end of the novel, we get to see, the American president, Howard. I can't remember his last name, but he's basically Donald Trump, but, whack. We get to see this scientist guy from the US who is a verified genius, and he gets put in charge of the dungeon busting stuff in the US, but he is kind of too much of a genius, so he can't really work with people. Then we get to see a few other characters, like the Chinese and two Korean leaders, so that's interesting. In terms of world building here, we have mostly political development. This is very clearly a alt history type of world. I mean, it's alt history up to the point of like the beginning of the dungeon busting situation. Before that, it's basically more or less the real world, but all of the countries have slightly different names in order to make it less, offensive, if anyone might get offended by it. Like I said, there's a lot of Japanese nationalism or patriotism, whatever version you want to call it. However, like I said, it's not really that big of a deal to me personally, although I know a lot of people might get annoyed by it. I saw a post on Reddit a while back when I was doing some research for this review that mentioned this, and a lot of people seemed upset by it. Most of them seem to be Americans, and I don't really get the point. I mean, the US is like highly patriotic, bordering on nationalism, especially nowadays, so I don't know. I don't really have a problem with it, but some people might, so be aware of that. And, there's some more development about the dungeon stuff, and we get to see how they kind of work a little bit more. Once you win the dungeon, you are able to change aspects of the dungeon, which is very kind of standard in dungeon core type stories as far as I know. So that's cool. In terms of artwork, it's great. It's also, again, kind of like too sexy for like what the story is really about. So, there is that, but it is still very, very good artwork. And in terms of fan service, there really isn't like specifically any fan service scene, but there are quite a few moments where you know what's going to happen and it fades to black before it even starts. So, there's like adult kind of situations that occur that are clearly there, but you don't get to see them. So, yeah. In terms of a rating, it's a 4 out of 5. I really enjoyed reading it. I really enjoy this story in general. It does have some slight issues, but most of them are very unimportant at the end of the day. At the end of my reading experience, they really don't matter all that much, and so I don't really have a problem with it. So a 4 out of 5. It was enjoyable and different from my usual, isekai light novel kind of stuff that I read, but it was also just not perfect or not like super wholly enjoyable, and so I can't give it a 5 out of 5 like I would anything else. So yeah, that's my review for Dungeon Busters Volume 2. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, please leave a like, subscribe, and comment down below. Let me know what you thought. Thank you guys very much for watching, and see you guys later.